So this video is going to be a revised tier list for the Army of Darkness DLC that came out. The main point that we're going to touch on, we're going to rate all the survivors a little bit differently. And I'm going to throw the demons in the tier list as well with the survivors. Because I see like a lot of people complaining that demons are underpowered. A lot of people saying that demons are terrible. Demons are not. I think the game is in an incredibly balanced position right now, which might seem a little bit hard to understand, but before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the tier list, let's cover why that was. In the last patch, guns got nerfed. I don't have any real way to show you, but all of the guns have been nerfed for the upgraded varieties. Now, the reason why I want to cover this is because a lot of people saying that Demon, because Demon lost his infinite combo, is in a really bad spot. And when we place the demons on the tier list, because the demons are going to be on the same tier list as Survivor, we're going to be discussing why. So, right now, for my D tier, which is characters I do not want to play, nobody's in D tier. C tier is the tier right above it. C tier is the tier of characters that are less than optimal. We have 2 survivors in this tier. At the bottom is Cheryl. Now, the reason why Cheryl is here is a bit interesting. She does her one job better than any other support in the game. She does a shit ton of healing. Her active ability is a heal. She's the cola girl, so her first passive gives her more colas. You start with more, you carry more. Her second passive is fear reduction when you drink a cola, and your third one is a bonus heal when you drink a cola. Here's the problem. You notice how everything I said had to deal with healing, 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 healing. She has no utility. Another thing I want to mention on supports. Support skill trees. I see this happening all the time. People speccing into long life battery, deep pocket amulets. Okay, that's fine, that's good. Stop speccing into both of these 2 abilities. These 2 abilities of reinforced amulet and improved amulet are terrible. Terrible. They are not worth speccing into. Reinforced amulet is 3 points for 10% damage reduction while you have a shield active. You're a support. You're going to lose your shield pretty much instantly. You're going to get focused a lot. Improved amulet only improves the length of the shield bar by 10 to 12%, because realistically you should only be putting 3 points. That's 6 points for a slight boost in your shield that's going to get destroyed almost immediately. Stop investing in these 2 points. Cheryl is on the bottom of the list, of the support tier list, because she's been gradually getting nerfed into the ground. Her original healing touch at the launch of the game was 80 healing per second on a 6-second duration with a 60-second cooldown. This let her do way too much healing compared to other characters. So, understandably, that got nerfed down to 60. But they also increased the cooldown to 120. And that really killed her viability. She really struggles now because your healing does next to no healing. It's a total heal of 360 if you're in it for the full duration, which is next to nothing. It's not even a quarter of a health bar on a warrior, and on leaders and supports, it's barely a quarter of your health bar if you're speccing into health, which you should. Because of that, she has to rely on her colas, and it makes her a very good early game killer, because if you get jumped by the demon early game, she has extra heals to keep the team going. The problem that Cheryl has is that her healing really isn't that good. Because while she does have 2 ways to heal, the Shemps, which she can out-heal anybody with her Shemps, and her healing touch, the fact that her only method of supporting the team is strictly through her 2 healing abilities, she loses a lot of value. The other survivor joining her in C tier is going to be Kelly. Kelly has the tools to be anywhere from a A tier all the way down to a C tier. But she's kind of like a lottery pick. She's kind of only good if you have... I'm trying to look and see if there's a build I can put with her. She's really only good in situations where you don't really need an extra piece. If you want to bring an extra of somebody. If she's your primary hunter, she's gonna suck. The reason for that is all three of the other hunters have a weapon mastery around a specific type of gun. So if you bring Amanda, you know she's gonna be running pistol. If you bring Ed, you know he's gonna run a crossbow. If you bring Ash, you know he's gonna be running around the double barrel. So the rest of your team can play around that. Kelly's weapon mastery is around the meat hammer. And she's designed more for melee combat, especially with her level 25 and her emphasis on dodging. The problem with her emphasis on dodging kind of sucks because as a hunter she can already do a lot of dodging. And she has this thing, she has both on her power and on her level 10 where successfully dodging inflicts bleed damage, which the bleed damage is removed from your actual damage and applied separately. That being said, because she doesn't have a ranged weapon to build around, in fact, she has the worst weapon mastery in the game at the meat hammer. The meat hammer is a terrible weapon to use. The meat hammer is the single worst weapon mastery, to the point where the only time she gets value is if she finds a purple or a legendary meat hammer. Then she can actually do close to the realm of damage that a common sword could do. And that's kind of embarrassing that she, even with her weapon mastery, needs a legendary weapon to do better. She, in my opinion, is the weakest of the hunters because she doesn't specialize in a gun. She specializes in melee and dodging. And hunters, being the squishy class that they are, really do not want to be in melee combat, except early game. So next up we have the B tier. These are characters that are good, but have flaws that hold them back. B tier is going to have 3 survivors and 2 demons in them. So starting off with the survivors first, we're going to start with Pablo. Now, all 3 of these characters in B tier can be in any order. Pablo is here. In my opinion, he is slightly stronger than Cheryl, but he is overall the weakest support. The reason why he's slightly stronger than Cheryl has to do with how his perks and abilities work. So his active ability drops an amulet on a 2-minute cooldown. The value to this ability is that you do not have to be the one to take advantage of it. You can simply create an amulet and drop it. The value that this has is that your teammates can pick them up and use them. So for example, if you are playing with a lot of warriors, or if you are playing with in an area that has very little loot, let's say you're in Misty Groves or you're in Hidden Acres, you're in an area of the map where there's not a lot of loot available to you, there's only 1 or 2 spots where there might be items. His ability to craft amulets means he doesn't have to pick them up. He can drop them, he can mark them, teammates can come and pick them up, or teammates can carry them. The reason why this is such a much more valuable ability than Cheryl's has to do with the fact that Cheryl's, while having the same cooldown and technically providing a better benefit because she's actively healing you, is also used instantly. It's a duration effect at that. If you're not in the duration, you're not getting the full value of the heal. His amulet is so strong because it keeps gaining value later and later into a game. Playing with a Pablo enables your warriors to spec into shields earlier, because if you get to 5 pink F points on shield, then 1 amulet fills 2 bars. At that point, Pablo can just pop his ability, drop an amulet for a warrior, and that's 2 shield bars for them. His level 10 passive lets you start the match with an additional amulet. This is relatively insignificant, but it does give him immediate value. Now, playing Pablo up to level 25, you essentially start the game with 3 amulets, because Legacy of El Brujo gives you 2, and you can craft an amulet at the start of the game. I think a balancing mechanic that they could do to Pablo to nerf him slightly, but I do think he could use a little bit of a readjustment, would be to make it so that Gift from El Brujo starts the match on cooldown to prevent you from just having 3 amulets at the start of the game and loading your teammates up with max shields. Is it really a necessary nerf? No, but I do think survivors do need a couple of nerfs. At level 25, you get access to Shamanic Protection, which makes it so that your shield will gradually recover until you have a full shield bar. This is a really annoying ability to have because of the fact that it hurts you at the start of the match, where at the start of the match, you want to pop amulets for your teammates so that they can be slightly shielded. The downside to this is you're kind of wasting your amulets if you use them at the start, unless you found Pink F and you just load your Pink F into shield early. Pablo's insistence on playing around shields seems like a negative because it hurts the amount of healing he does for his team. In fact, his only way to heal is off of Shemps, which forces you to build into Packing Pop, Deep Pockets Shemps, and Shemps Plus if you didn't want to build into those. So why, if he's a worse version of Cheryl, is he a tier higher? Infernal Camouflage. Infernal Camouflage means the demon is no longer allowed to detect you during demon vision. What that means is Pablo will never appear on a demon's minimap. He will never appear with a noise notification from firing a gun, driving a car, or his fear getting too high. He can essentially, at the start of the game, ignore melee. You can grab a gun with Pablo, get into a car, and drive to the first map piece and start rushing objective. Now, this is simultaneously a double-edged sword. Pablo tends to burn through ammo a lot, and if he is using a gun that your hunter is using, it's going to drain your team's resources earlier. If Pablo runs off on his own in a car to find the map piece and runs into the demon, Pablo is dead 70% of the time because he's not winning a one-on-one against the demon. If Pablo gets in a car and runs off to find the map piece, and his teammates get found by the demon first, then one of two things is going to happen. All of your team is going to die, and the game's going to be over because if you go to resurrect them, you're going to die because it's a 1v1, or your teammates are going to get so low that when you do finally regroup with them, you are going to have to burn all of your resources to get everybody healed and shielded back up, and it will negate the value entirely. And if the demon has been able to get a few players down, or even a few players dead, he's going to level up significantly, and your team is going to be under-leveled. So Pablo's a little bit of a double-edged sword in the support class. This is why he's in B tier. He has more sheer utility than Cheryl does because of his stealth. Because of the fact he can use guns earlier on, he can actually take early game crowd control because he can just start wiping through minions while your team loots. The next character in B tier is going to be Amanda. Amanda's in B tier because she has two conflicting problems. Her power, Ammo for Days, is really good. It's 7 seconds of unlimited ammo at your gun's base rate of fire. This is really good for high damage weapons that have low magazine capacities or long reloads. Blunderbuss, boomstick, shotgun, double barrel, crossbow. This is also a good gun for rapid fire weapons that run out of ammo quickly. Pistol, lever action, saw gun. What this is not good for, however, is it doesn't synergize with the rest of her kit. Your starting passive starts the game with the pistol, and your level 10 passive gives you pistol mastery. And your level 25 is really only going to work with either the pistol, the lever action, the revolver, or the saw gun. Now the saw gun's terrible, the lever action is terrible, and the revolver you don't have a mastery for, but it is the better of the two. This makes Amanda in an awkward spot if you play around your 3 passive abilities, you're using a pistol, which means you're mostly using ammo for days when you're either out of ammunition at the end of a match, because the pistol burns through ammo, or if a boss spawns, or a possessed elite, or a possessed basic spawns. If you don't build around your passive and just run best gun available, purple boomstick, legendary blunderbuss, purple revolver, ammo for days gets more value, but the rest of your passives don't. Accuracy counts does work with your power, which is nice, but it doesn't work if you reload. So if you run a 2-shot boomstick or hunting rifle, for example, the first shot hits doesn't proc the bonus. Your second shot will proc the bonus, so it'll deal 2% more damage, but then you reload and you cancel your bonus. So accuracy counts is kind of terrible unless you're playing around the pistol. And if you're playing around the pistol, you lose some of the value of her as a hunter with ammo for days. Now, the pistol is by no means a bad weapon. People say it's a bad weapon, don't know what they're talking about. It has a specific role. I would prefer if she received a slight buff so the weapon master covered the entire pistol class, pistol and revolver. Because you might say, as a cop, it makes sense because cops still use revolvers. Not every cop out there is still using a Glock. So because of that, having access to revolver mastery and pistol mastery would give her a little bit more options, in my opinion. That would bump her up to A tier from B tier, but right now the conflicting power to me is going to keep her in B tier. The last survivor in B tier is Leader Ash, which is unfortunate because I do enjoy playing Leader Ash. I actually play him the most out of the 3 leaders. The reason why Leader Ash is here, I also want to mention this. Every time I see a leader build, I see people speccing into this tree for Master of Influence. Master of Influence does not work the way you think it works. It strengthens the effect of your aura by 20%. That does not increase the effectiveness of your aura from 15% to 35%. That is not how it works. It increases it by 20% of its base value. So that means that your 15% goes to 18%. It is not worth spending a minimum of 7 points for a 3% damage bonus. It's really not. I'm tired of seeing leader builds with that involved in it. It's really aggravating to me. Leader Ash is here because he's the jack of all trades leader and the master of none. All of his power has relative synergy. Relative. But it's not really effective enough. Now, as a leader, he has no negative drawbacks to melee or ranged, unlike the other classes in the game. He's the generic standard survivor. So speccing him into health is good to make him slightly tankier. Now, the problem is his health upgrade only goes up to 20%. Combining this with your pink F, it means you're not as tanky as a support or a warrior. And it also, while you do have access to hollow points at 4, and Devastating Force at 4, whereas the support class can only go hollow points up to 3, which means you would be the next best ranged character behind a hunter, and you would be the next best melee character behind a warrior. Leaders in general have fallen down a little bit because they're very much based around team synergy. Ash is in the B tier because he doesn't fit any lineup particularly well. The other 2 leaders are higher on the list because they can fit with multiple lineups. Arthur's lineup works well in any lineup that wants to increase melee damage. This could be 2 supports and a warrior. This could be 2 supports and a hunter. This could be 2 warriors. This could be support Ash with a hunter and a warrior. And he works for any lineup that wants to buff range weapon damage or overall balance bar. Balance bar build warriors like Army of Darkness Ash or Henry. This works well with multiple hunter lineups or a hunter that you're pairing up with at the start. This works well with Pablo. This works well with supports that are spec'd into melee and seeing stars. Ash doesn't have a lineup he specs in very well with. Now, Ash's active ability is probably the worst in the game. It's a balance bar damage. On a possessed unit, it's not enough to one-shot their balance bar. On an AI unit, it's overkill. You have no need to pop it on AI units. It doesn't inflict any damage, just balance bar. Now, this might not make sense, but it'll make more sense when you get to his level 25. At level 10, you start the match with a chainsaw, but you have no other synergy with the chainsaw until you reach his level 25. His passive aura is a 15% damage buff to any type of damage and a 20% fear resistance, so fear builds slower. His level 25 is really what makes him shine. This is what keeps him out of C tier, but also prevents him from getting into A tier. Because this is his level 25 ability, if you're not level 25, you are essentially a C or a D tier character. You're just a guy with a small damage bonus, a small balance bar bonus, and you start the match with a chainsaw, which just means you're armed at the beginning of the game, or you can drop it for your Army of Darkness Ash, if you're playing with one. Outside of that, you don't get any real value out of this. At level 25, everything all comes together. Every time you perform a finisher kill, or dismember an enemy, you double the effectiveness of your aura, which goes up to 30% damage and 40% fear resist, and it lasts for 5 seconds. The chainsaw now gives you a much more reliable way to dismember limbs, and the balance bar damage gives you a reliable way to proc finisher kills. However, this is tied to your level 25 skill. Now, I have a level 25 leader Ash. He was the second or third character I got to level 25. And the more I play him, the more he requires a very strategic team. He requires a team that is doing most of the damage so you can get a finisher so they can do even more damage. Because he doesn't synergize very well with any particular lineup, he's in B tier. Now, joining him in B tier are going to be 2 of the 3 demon options. Warlord and Puppeteer are both here. Now, this allows me to talk about the demons. Warlord got massive nerfs in the original Tassel Kandar patch. They nerfed her puke, they nerfed the possession mechanic for her and Necromancer, which supposedly nerfed her into the ground. It didn't. It just changed her playstyle. Before, your strategy with a Henrietta would be quite simple. You were going to build pretty much entirely around basic units and puke, grab a basic unit, possess them, puke, dodge cancel out, smack a survivor 3 to 4 times before they could react. Half their health bar is gone. And you could just keep chaining and chaining and chaining. That and her power is really good. Really good. Short cooldown, works once you've possessed a unit, as long as you activate it in spirit form, buff your nearby units to make them stronger. At level 45, units can't take balance bar damage. She removes the ability to F-chain for survivors. She's a really good demon. Why is she in B tier? Her playstyle revolves more around late game. Great capacity for evil gives you a much larger energy threshold. Later in game, you can maintain possession on your boss units and your possessed units for longer. But at the beginning of the game, the drain is too significant until you get up to threat level 15 and get access to your 3rd possession upgrade. That nerf to her prevents her from being an early game threat. She's meant to be built up more into the boss. She's meant to be built up more into health and balance bar. And she's meant to be built up to smack the book. If you want a longer game, you're going to play the Warlord. And the reason for that is because she's able to do the most damage at the end of a game to the book. I keep seeing people saying Puppeteer and Necromancer are better for the book. I'm sorry. They're wrong. They really are. Because you can pop your power, summon a bunch of units, pop your power, and then possess a unit. Your really bad influence at level 45 keeps those targets from being F-chained. Those targets can wail on the book with Reckless Abandon. They're not getting stunned. You are who they're going to focus on, because you're not affected by that. And if you build up your health and your balance bar, you can keep, especially as a boss, you can keep wailing. I really do think her Gas Leak ability is probably the most annoying demon ability in the game right now. I really do. The fact that it deals damage and has a stun that keeps you from sprinting, dodging, healing, swinging, shooting is really annoying on occasion. It feels like it activates way too often. It is really strong with her in boss form. It should pretty much always be active whenever you can. Joining her in B tier is the other demon, the Puppeteer. This is the demon that you're going to play if you want early game rushdown, if you want to destroy very quickly. The Puppeteer is based around possession. He doesn't have as many of the nerfs and drawbacks to possession like the other two demons do. He has two ways to possess because he has his puppet power, which did get nerfed. The cooldown for it now applies when the unit you possess dies. However, this can be offset by a couple of things. People have always said that his basic units were the weakest in the game. They nerfed his elite units. People say they're the weakest in the game. He's a much more strategic demon. And his boss form is actually the best of the three bosses in my opinion. While it is lower health, the number one thing I want to mention is the invisibility while moving allows him to take much less damage. Him having so many AoE abilities. All three of his abilities are crowd control abilities that can stun at least 1 to 2 survivors at a time. I mean, even if you miss with casting stones, it's going to force an opponent, your survivor counterpart, to dodge and play more defensively because it can deal so much damage. He has a lot of crafty tools in his arsenal. You can make an elite build that is still really good, that's based around clones, elites, lightning. You can make a possessed build where you can possess survivors for a much needed early game rush. And he has a lot of tools that make his possession really good. A lot of tools. Doing bonus damage when you possess a survivor, possessing a survivor and them taking less damage, being able to possess survivors. He has a lot of play styles, but none of them are particularly great. A lot of them also have to do with his Puppet Master ability. For example, Puppet Master Invigorating Possession only works with your Puppet Master Possessed, not a regular Possessed. Puppet Master Basic and Puppet Master Elite also only work with your Puppet Master ability. So you have to play around a few different styles of play with the Puppeteer. He also is going to deal the least damage. He relies a lot more on crowd control abilities, stunning survivors, and just generally annoying and harassing them. It's an uncomfortable style of play that's kind of gimmicky, but a good Puppeteer player will win 90% of their games. A bad Puppeteer player is going to lose 90% of their games. He probably has the hardest skill grade of all. Now, for the A tier, which are the strong but not perfect characters, we're going to have one demon, who we're going to cover first, and we're going to have 4 survivors. For the demon, the Necromancer right now is the best.
even with the nerf to the infinite combo. The reason why his units are the best in my opinion, he has multiple viable styles of play. The first is a flutist build, where you pop the flute down, you summon an army, you possess something, and you just go in and start smacking shit. It doesn't even matter if you die, you can deal so much damage under the effect of the flutist. You can also make a boss build. He has a lot of tools for making boss better and for spam swarming. He has so many options in his arsenal for doing this. What you do have to be careful with him is that your boss will melt relatively quickly if you don't buff the health. But if you buff the health, like, he has so many options that you want to do. When I was making this particular build for him, I wanted to buff the health of the boss, but I didn't want to waste these filler points right here. I wanted to reduce the cooldowns on placing portals, but I couldn't spend the points, because there's only so many points I could spend in this tree. I wanted to buff Speed Summoner, but I couldn't because I didn't have the points for it. He's one of those characters that doesn't have nearly enough points to make him what he wants. So you have to commit to a particular style of play, whether you want it to be a boss build, an elite build, or a basic unit build. All of the builds are viable. Because he's also the best at 1v1ing survivors and 2v1ing survivors, he can handle groups of survivors fairly well. Obviously not a full 4 group of survivors, but he can still do very well in isolated matchups. It makes him a very good demon for being able to contest survivors at objective points, like the page and the dagger. But it also requires you level him up a little bit with your pink F tree in game, your threat level. I'm still going to call it pink F. And it requires you have a little bit of a build. A level 1 Necromancer that's only built around Flute to Kill is not going to do that well. But in my opinion, he is the most well-rounded of the demons, because he doesn't have a particular weak spot other than just level him up a little bit. He's going to be the top demon. Now, for the 4 survivors who are in A tier, both of the leaders are here. I see a lot of people shitting on Arthur, and I don't know why. Both Annie and Arthur are good in the role that they serve. Arthur has a sword mastery and starts the match with a sword. This immediately gives him access to one of the top 3 best melee weapons in the game, bar none. If you don't like the sword, drop it for your warrior. If you want to run a meme build where he's built around guns, drop it for your warrior. There's no downside to starting with the sword, especially because he doesn't have to unlock it. And at level 10, he buffs both heavy and light attacks by 30% within his aura. Now, this means any warrior, a support Ashe, automatically benefits from him. Now, hunters and other supports or other leaders may not benefit as much if they're not spec'd into melee. That's fine. The reason why that's fine is because his melee benefits also apply to him. His level 25 is arguably not that great, neither is his power. It essentially just buffs his damage from a 30% bonus to a 50% bonus, and performing a finisher extends the duration slightly so that you can perform another finisher. That's essentially what you're looking for. It's good for boss fight scenarios. He's essentially the guy you run in melee heavy comps. Now, if you compare this to Annie, she's the flip side of the coin. Annie does really good range weapon damage. Very similar to Arthur. 25% bonus to range weapon damage, comparable to Arthur's 30. Her active ability buffs her range damage and her teammates' damage by the same 15-second duration, by the same 45-second cooldown, up to 30%. So, she goes up to a 55% bonus on range weapons, similar to Arthur's 50%. She also has 2 bonus auras at level 10 and 25 that just buff balance bar damage to basics at 10 and elites and bosses at 25. So, both of these characters are very good. Remember that they're leaders. So the fact that they have no negative debuffs to weapons mean Annie is a flat 25% better with guns than supports and warriors are. And remember, they have drawbacks. Arthur is a flat 30% better with melee. It means he has the second highest melee damage per attack behind only the 3 hunters. No other character has a higher base melee total than him. This means these two characters require a bit of synergy. Now, Annie's balance bar bonuses can lend her to being slightly stronger than Arthur, but Arthur is by no means weak. Remember that his 30% aura completely removes any hunter's penalty while they're in his aura, and any support's penalty while they're in his aura. In fact, supports do 10% more melee damage. It buffs a warrior's melee damage up to 80% by default. Now, it may not seem like a lot. What Arthur is good is masking his team's weaknesses rather than making them stronger. If you play a 1-1-1 lineup, let's say you just run all of these guys right here. Arthur makes Pablo's melee damage better, Kelly's melee damage is normal, and Henry's melee damage is insane. He's not going to do anything else other than make their melee damage numbers better. But with Pablo being able to use guns at the start of the game, and Arthur not having a penalty to guns, he can pick up a good gun as well and jump in. You're not actively hampering your team's range capabilities. Let's look at Annie. Let's say you run Annie in a lineup, a straight lineup right here. Ed obviously is going to get a massive boost to his range weapon damage. Cheryl has her range weapon damage from -20 to +5. She can use guns much more effectively to defend herself. Scotty's not really getting the benefit out of the range, but where her second ability comes in, will massively buff the balance bar for both him and to a certain extent Cheryl, because she can now use melee as an F-chaining tool. Both of these leaders are good, but require much more synergy and much more thinking than Ash does. Ash is kind of a plug and play. You can plug him in any lineup. He's not going to do good. He's not going to do bad. Whereas if you run Annie, for example, in a lineup that consists of 1 warrior and 2 supports, you're not really getting a lot of value out of that. If you run Arthur into a lineup that has 2 hunters and a support, you're not getting any value out of that. If you're running Annie in a lineup that has 3 warriors, you're not getting any value out of that. So you have to look at how aggressive your lineup is going to be and pick which one of the leaders works best for you. Now, the next character that I have is Ed. Ed can really bounce back and forth between A and S. He's an A for a couple reasons. The nerf to guns did not hurt the collector because it still does buff your melee weapon drops, which are good, and because it does buff the drop rates of items from enemies, which means you shouldn't be running out of ammo, or colas, or shemps, or amulets. His passive, his starting passive, is pretty much tied to his power. His power is kind of glitchy right now. It doesn't work when it's supposed to. If it works, it is one of the best abilities in the game, because it allows you to disarm active and inactive demon traps against some demons that can completely cut out their arsenal of attack. If you have a demon that built around fear traps early to get elites out of fear traps, he can shut you down. If you are planning on trapping every chest you can see, he can shut that down. The downside is if the demon is not setting traps. If they are a possession-based demon that's focused on portal, possess, attack, his power gets no value. And I'm seeing a lot more of those demons, so his stock is gradually dropping. The other thing that's going to hold him back is actually his weapon mastery. So there are 2 crossbows in the game. A regular, which is a single-shot, direct damage ability, and the explosive, which is a single-shot, AoE damage ability that deals half the damage that the regular crossbow does, but because it hits in an area. The downside is that both crossbows are relatively hard to hit. if you're not prepared to aim a projectile weapon like this. The crossbow mastery can be non-existent, so Ed can kind of play around the best gun available. But at the same time, the regular crossbow is the highest damage per shot weapon in the game. And even though his mastery is only 10%, applying to both crossbows is really good. I find myself right now where if I'm not finding a blue or higher rarity crossbow, I'm tending not to use the crossbow as much. I'm tending to use another gun. And even then, if I'm running a purple revolver and I find a blue explosive crossbow, I'm probably sticking with that purple revolver over the crossbow. He's kind of in a weird position where his power is really good when it works. But if it doesn't work, there's no point to it. And his crossbow mastery is really good if you like crossbows, but if you don't like crossbows, or if you're having difficulty hitting your shots, it's terrible. So that's what's going to keep him in A tier. He, to me, was an S tier character before the introduction of the explosive crossbow, because at that point you could basically just say he had the single highest DPS on a headshot build, because if you hit a headshot, you pretty much insta-killed whatever. He flat out melts people. Now, while that's still true, even though the crossbow bonus is at 10%, you do have to choose what your playstyle is going to be if you want to spec into headshots with the regular crossbow, or if you want to spec into explosive damage on the crossbow. The only other character in A tier is going to be Henry. Now, Warriors as a whole got a massive buff, in my opinion, because of the nerf to Hunters. The nerf to the range weapon damage makes Hunters slightly less playable, in my opinion. But even though Demons had their infinite combos nerfed, particularly the Puppeteer and the Necromancer, the fact that taking any damage knocks you out of your ADS as a Hunter, it's really pissing me off as I'm trying to play Hunters right now. Because it basically means if I fire my gun and the demon turns around and comes after me, I have to drop my gun. If I can't kill them before they can hit me, I have to drop my gun, and I just have to go into melee. Leaders got a nerf inadvertently because warriors became much stronger, with guns being slightly less valuable. Leaders got a nerf because now you don't have to worry about your leader having to carry a pistol or a lever action and being on depossessed duty whenever a hunter got possessed. So leaders stopped drops a little bit. Support got a little bit better, in my opinion, because warriors got buffed. You want more warriors. The only warrior that is in A tier is going to be Henry. And Henry is in A tier because his passives suck. His power is really good, but his passives suck. Just being a warrior keeps him in A tier. If his passives were better, he'd be in S tier. Warrior's ability to just pick up a big melee weapon and go swing on a horde of demons is fantastic. People talk about the balance bar meta. I don't care about the balance bar meta. Warriors should be spec'd into big damage per swing. Me want big swingy hammerman, because then they don't have to worry about finishers and animations and things of that nature. Now, the option is still there, but they shouldn't have to spec into it. Henry, in my ability, has one of the single best powers in the game, because it enables him to extend points longer than he should. It enables him to get revives off that no other character can get. It allows him to resurrect. The only way you're getting knocked out of your ability when you pop it is if the demon dashes through you, or if a boss unit grabs you. Outside of that, he can do whatever the fuck he wants while his ability is active. Do you want to fire a gun and reload it for whatever reason? Do you want to go for a heavy attack? Do you want to just keep swinging away? Do you want to run away? Do you want to get into a car and drive away? Do you want to activate something that you couldn't activate because you were being hit by demons? His power is really good for that. The problem is that he needs to build into shields to get effectiveness out of his passives. Shields up gives you an extra shield bar. He's the only character that gets an extra shield, so he gets 2 shield bars at the start and 5 in total, whereas everybody else gets 1 shield bar at the start, 4 in total. His second passive got nerfed, where it only works when you have a shield active, and it reflects some of the damage back to you. But your shields can't take that much damage as much as your health bar actually can, so you're not dealing a lot of damage back. And Battle Hardened is just a 10% bonus to your health bar and each shield bar. Now you could spec into a full amulet build. The problem is, you then need amulets to activate. Another downside to why he's in C tier actually has to do with pink F. In-game, you want to spend your first 5 pink F points on the shield, so you can get the maximum benefit out of your passives. In doing so, you take away your pink F melee damage tree, which means he's more of a long game melee player. If the demon rushes you early game, you are definitely going to feel the effects of it. And another issue that I have, I noticed this as I was grinding Henry and leveling him to level 25. If I died because my ability was on cooldown, the entire team falls apart. When there's a Henry on the team, a lot of players rely on him popping his ability to get people up. If the demon focuses you and prevents you from getting revives, and you die trying to get a revive, or you die because your ability's on cooldown, because you're like, I can take a hit or two before I pop it, so I can buy a little more time. No. You've basically cost the entire team. And one of the beauties of the warrior class, why the other 2 warriors are both in S tier, spoiler alert, is because they have no reliance on their teammates. All they need to do is have a Shemps on them and just go in swinging. And when you get low, dodge back, Shemps. Go back to swinging. Which is the spoiler alert. So let's cover S tier. Here's your warriors. Scotty's in S tier. I don't care. Scotty is in S tier for a couple of reasons. Number 1, he did receive a buff to his damage on the passive, on his active ability. Don't care about that. It was always pretty good. Scotty specs into heavy melee attacks. This means at the start of the game, you can pick up a light melee weapon, like a hunting knife, meat cleaver, meat hammer, that nobody else wants, and just start swinging. If you have a high rarity meat hammer, you don't have a Kelly, you don't have a support Ash, pick it up. If you have a high rarity of a weapon that nobody else wants, you can pick it up and get massive value out of your heavy attacks. Unless you are level 25, in which case you get the weapon mastery for the best weapon in the game, which is the Lumberjack Axe, because it has the best attack animations. The sword has good light attack animations, but terrible heavy attack animations. The chainsaw can only get used by 3 characters. So because of that, the best generic melee weapon is the Lumberjack Axe. It deals good balance bar damage for a sharp weapon, and good dismemberment damage. So he has weapon mastery for the best weapon in the game, and he gets bonuses to heavy attacks. His exposure therapy could knock him down to A tier because it's really not that good. People say, well, I don't like building around heavy attacks. They're too slow. The thing you're missing is that a good build for him, similar to this, 1 swing is all you need. 1 swing should outright kill the enemy in front of you and deal collateral damage to nearby enemies, which you can then use Thunder Thrust to pop for even more damage or to finish them off. He doesn't have to spec into shields like Henry does. He doesn't have to spec into balance bar or worry about managing his cooldown. He can literally pop it in any situation if it's off cooldown. If there's an enemy nearby, you can pop it. That to me puts him in S tier because of the fact he is the simplest character to play. He has the highest upside. Warrior Ash is also here, because Warrior Ash is the best character in the game. There's still no arguing that. His active ability just makes him better at everything. It reduces fear, it increases health, it increases defense, it increases damage. And it lasts for a good duration. It's something you can pop in order to reduce your fear to get to a fire, so you can light it. It's something you can pop to give yourself a little bit of a healing boost until a support can come over and heal you. It gives you a little bit of extra damage and damage reduction to get through a tough fight with a possessed or a boss. His starting passive and his level 10 passive synergize very well. Kill an enemy, recover your shield. Pop your shield, damage enemies nearby. And he has the Chainsaw Mastery at level 25, which means he can do more dismemberment damage than any other character in the game. Because Chainsaw is the #1 dismemberment, and he gets a bonus to that. While the Chainsaw is a good weapon, it is a better weapon in my opinion than the Lumberjack Axe. Only 3 Ashes can use it, so it's the #2 weapon in the game. So, he gets a Mastery for that. The one downside I have against him is because he's a warrior and you want to build him for one shot, one kill potential with a melee weapon, you might find it difficult to build around finishers to regenerate your shield. Oftentimes what I find myself doing is I'll pop my amulets and load up on shields. My shields all get burned in a big group fight. I can only regen 1 shield because I take damage too much. Now I can inflict a ton of damage, but because I'm also going for finisher kills, your damage numbers are going to be lower than the other 2, because the other 2 don't need finishers. Ash does. So again, he has one thing holding him back, but he is the strongest survivor in the game, bar none. Now the other 2 Ashes are both S tier in my opinion. The best hunter is the Hunter Ash. So at level 10, you start the game with one of the 3 best guns in the game. You can make an argument whether the shotgun, the boomstick, or the double barrel is the best gun in the game. But most people agree one of those 3 is the best guns in the game. At level 25, you get weapon mastery with it. This means you can do more damage with a common double barrel than you can most upgraded guns. Even something like a legendary pistol. Nah, you do more damage with the double barrel. Something like a blue or a purple boomstick? Double barrel. Double barrel stronger. His treasure hunter ability gives you the ability to scout and loot very quickly. You can walk by a house, see if there's a crate, and just move on if you're specifically looking for crates and pink F. Most of the time, this allows him to be the best leveled character in a game. And his Exorcist ability is one of the strongest abilities in the game for pissing demons off. What holds him back? The only thing that really holds him back is the fact that there's 2 ways to build him. You're either going to build him for fear resist, because the demon wants to possess you, and they want to shoot your teammates, and you 2-shot most of your teammates. Or you build him for melee, because he can hold his own. He's one of the only characters in the game, along with Pablo and probably Warrior Ash, that can wander off on their own and 1v1 a demon. Because if it's a possessed unit, a possessed basic unit, you pop your Exorcist. And if it's a possessed elite or a boss, your double barrel mastery really comes in handy there. So you've gotta decide if you want a lone wolf melee build, or if you want a fear and health build to give yourself a little bit more staying power. Now the last character who's also in S tier, as relatively controversial as Support Ash. I love Support Ash right now. Support Ash is the best healer in the game. I can get anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 plus healing now with him, since they reworked his alternative healing. And there are a lot of melee weapons in the game that are terrible. You don't want to pick up under every other character is going to pass over. The meat hammer, the meat cleaver, the hunting knife, the pickaxe, the machete. Any of those weapons, the rest of the characters say, this is terrible, I don't want to play. he can pick up and immediately get value and heal out of. His marked target has been fixed, providing much more consistent range damage bonus and healing. This is mostly how you're going to heal your hunters, because you can pop a target and say, shoot him, and they can heal in 1 to 2 shots back to full health. And he has overall utility with fear reduction. Now, the fear reduction is not great, but it's on a 60-second cooldown. I wish the area of effect was bigger. That's the only complaint. That's the only thing holding him back. And you might say that his healing numbers aren't great. He still has access to Shem's heal. He has 3 ways to heal his teammates, which no other support has. And he is no longer a liability in combat, because you can use whatever weapon you want. Do you want to use a big, beefy weapon and do more burst healing, but slower? Do you want to pick up a faster weapon and just go in there guns blazing, machine gunning heals out? Lower heals, but heals nonetheless. Overall, I think the survivors are at an interesting point. I think some of the supports, even the supports who are very high on my list, could use a buff. Scotty could use a buff. Support Ash could use a buff. Cheryl could use a buff. Amanda could use a buff. Arthur, Leader Ash could use a buff. Henry could use a buff. I don't think there's a single survivor that needs to get nerfed outside of maybe Pablo and Warrior Ash could use a little retweak. All of your demons have a designated point in the game in which they can play, where they're not a complete liability. It all comes down to your individual skill and how good the survivors you're going up against are, how well organized they are, how much they've leveled in game, and what type of weapons they have. You know, you could be a level 45 Necromancer, but if you run up against an Ed with a legendary crossbow, an Ash with a legendary chainsaw, an Arthur with a legendary sword, and a Cheryl with a legendary hunting rifle, you're not winning that game. You're not. You're going to have to work really hard if you want to win that game. Whereas you can be a level 1 Warlord, and if Henry is using guns and has a hunting knife, you've got Annie with, you know, a shovel, but she's not using her guns. You got a Hunter Ash who has something like a legendary pistol or a legendary lever action instead of his gun. And let's say you have a Pablo that's run off on their own, you're going to win that regardless of what level you are. I think all of the demons' issue is you're either a top 10 demon in the game and you win every game, no matter how good the survivors are, or you're completely at the mercy of the survivors and how good you could play against them. I've had some demons that have lost games with a few seconds to go, where they would have won in a few seconds just because we had a couple extra points of health. We've had some games where I had a game where I had over 100,000 damage with Henry, and we lost it because we didn't have enough healing items. Because we just didn't have the healing we needed. And if we had more healing items, just 1 or 2 more healing items, we would have won that game. So, I think the game's in a relatively balanced situation. I think the issue is that demons either bully survivors and the survivors DC, and so then the demons back into a queue, and they get frustrated constantly being in queues because survivors DC, or the demon players get a game instantly but get bullied by good survivors, and then they don't want to play anymore. So, that's the revised list.